We'd been closest friends since we were 5. Everyone knew we were in love, but us. You know that feeling when you think you have everything figured out? When your entire world is built around one person. Well, what if that person, your absolute best friend, your other half, was actually the biggest obstacle to becoming who you were truly meant to be? And what if figuring that out meant tearing your whole life apart? Leo and I, we were practically born attached at the hip. From the moment my mom made me take cookies to the new kid next door, Leo, who was sitting on his front steps looking utterly miserable, our lives were intertwined. I, a fearless 5-year-old, told him he could share my friends. He, a grumpy 5-year-old, declared girls had cooties. So, naturally, I dumped an entire plate of chocolate chip cookies on his head. And just like that, we were inseparable. For the next 13 years, it was us. We did everything together. He walked me to school every single morning, even when the other boys gave him grief for hanging out with a girl. And me? I was at every single one of his baseball games, even the away ones that meant 3-hour bus rides. I had this whole ritual of painting his jersey number on my face, screaming louder than any actual girlfriend in the stands. People always asked if we were dating, and we'd just laugh, like it was the most ridiculous question in the world. We weren't boyfriend and girlfriend. We were Leo and Julia. And somehow, that felt both bigger and smaller than any label. High school, though, that's when everyone started pushing it. His teammates would tease him, "She's so obviously in love with you, man." My friends would whisper, "He looks at you differently, I swear." We'd just roll our eyes, explaining for the 100th time that growing up together made us basically siblings. I mean, I knew everything gross about him, like his midnight cheese block raids. And he'd seen me through chickenpox, braces, and that absolutely disastrous perm sophomore year. You just don't date someone who helped you bury your hamster in 3rd grade, right? That's just against the rules. College almost broke us. He went to state for engineering, I went to art school 40 minutes away for graphic design. That first month was brutal. I'd call him, sobbing, because my roommate was a psycho, and he'd drive over at midnight, just to bring me soup when I got sick. He'd text me during lectures, because his lab partner wouldn't stop hitting on him, and he had no clue how to shut her down without being a jerk. We made a pact: Sunday dinners no matter what. Sometimes it meant meeting halfway at this crappy diner with terrible food, but it was exactly 20 minutes from both our schools. Those Sundays, they kept me sane. Then junior year, everything changed. Leo started dating Becca, a girl from his program. She was smart, she was pretty, and the worst part? She was actually really, really nice. For the first time in 16 years, Leo had someone else who came first. He still made it to Sunday dinners, but now he'd spend half the time texting her, his phone buzzing under the table. When I called him, heartbroken over failing a project, he was at her place. Couldn't talk long. I told myself, this is good. This is normal. I'm happy for him. But there was this little pang in my chest that wouldn't go away. So I started dating too. Daniel from my painting class. Sweet, funny, and absolutely defiantly not Leo. The 4 of us even went on these incredibly awkward double dates. Everyone was trying way too hard to make it work. Becca would innocently ask, "Oh, how long have you two been friends?" That's so cute. Like our friendship was some kind of quirky novelty. Daniel would try to jump in on inside jokes he didn't understand, completely missing the point. Leo and I, we couldn't even look at each other properly. It felt like we were betraying the people we were with just by making eye contact. Everything just exploded senior year. Becca got into grad school in California, and she wanted Leo to move with her after graduation. She gave him this whole speech about how it was time to leave childhood things behind and start their real life together. The childhood thing? That was me. Leo told me all about it during our Sunday dinner, and I, being the good friend, told him he should absolutely go. Becca was amazing. California had great engineering jobs. He just stared at me for the longest time, then said, "Yeah, I was right." That night, I went back to my dorm and cried. I mean, I sobbed until my roommate actually threatened to call health services. 2 weeks later, Daniel broke up with me. "You're clearly in love with someone else," he said. "And I deserve better than being second choice." I wanted to argue. to deny it with everything I had, but I couldn't. Because deep down, some part of me knew he was right, even if I'd never dared to admit it out loud. The week before graduation, Leo showed up at my apartment at 3 a.m. This wasn't unusual, but he was completely sober, and he looked absolutely destroyed. He told me he'd ended things with Becca. She'd asked him to choose California with her or stay near me. And he couldn't do it. "You're an idiot," I remember saying, my voice raw. "You're ruining your future over a friendship." He just looked at me, this intense gaze, and said, "That's the problem, Julia. You're not just my friend. Not anymore. Not for years." Then he kissed me. My entire body shook. I pulled back, my heart hammering against my ribs. Leo was just staring, his eyes scared and hopeful all at once, and I couldn't breathe. We had just crossed a line. A massive, irreversible line. My brain was scrambling, trying to find the perfect thing to say, but all that came out was, Did you really break up with Becca for me?" He just nodded, like it was the most obvious answer in the world, and my stomach flipped. We sat there on my apartment steps, not touching, just looking, and I could hear my heart beating in my ears. His hair was messy. He had those tired lines around his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. I wanted to kiss him again and run away. At the same time, we eventually went inside, but we sat on opposite ends of my couch. I was too terrified to be close. All night, we just talked. No touching. Leo told me he'd been in love with me since sophomore year of high school, when I showed up to his baseball game with the flu because I'd promised I'd be there. He said he'd convinced himself it was just friendship because I never seemed interested in him that way. I sat there listening, feeling like the biggest idiot on the planet. All those years telling everyone we were just siblings, when apparently we both knew better. When it was my turn, I admitted Daniel was right. I told Leo. The first just couldn't admit it was him until he kissed me that night. We talked until the sun started to peek through my window. At some point, we both fell asleep on the couch, our feet almost touching in the middle. My roommate, Raina, found us like that the next morning, fully dressed and completely passed out. She took one look, then started demanding to know what happened. I was still half asleep when I mumbled. Leo and I kissed. And Raina screamed. So loud my neighbor banged on the wall. "I knew it," she yelled. "Everyone's been waiting for this since you were kids." Her reaction, it made it all feel real, in a way that scared me. Now, other people knew. There was no taking it back. Raina made us coffee, grinning, while Leo and I avoided each other's eyes. She asked about our first date, and I suddenly realized we hadn't even talked about what this meant. Leo left to go change, and Raina looked at me. "You look happy and terrified, all at the same time." She was absolutely right. Leo texted me later, asking if I wanted to get coffee near campus. An actual date. I said yes, even though my hands were shaking typing it. We met at a coffee shop we'd been to 100 times before, but suddenly, everything felt different. And weird. I kept catching myself falling into best friend mode, rambling about my design project, asking about his engineering lab. Then, "Oh right, we're supposed to be romantic now." I knocked over my coffee twice. I was so nervous. The second time, it spilled all over the table, and Leo jumped up to grab napkins. As we walked back to campus, he reached for my hand. I let him take it. His hand felt warm, familiar, and completely wrong all at the same time. Like we were playing pretend in someone else's relationship. I kept thinking about all the times I'd held his hand when we were kids. But this was different, and I didn't know how to be different with Leo. A week went by, and we were still trying to figure out how to be together instead of just friends. Leo came over to study, and he casually mentioned I should look for graphic design jobs near his school after graduation. Something snapped inside me. "I'm not Becca, Leo," I heard myself say, my voice sharper than I intended. "I'm not going to rearrange my whole life just because you decided we're together now." He looked hurt, said he just wanted us in the same city. But I could hear what he really meant. He expected me to be the one to move, to compromise, to give things up. We had our first real fight right there in my apartment, textbooks spread everywhere. He said I was being unfair. I said he was being selfish. and we both knew we were really fighting about being scared. He left without kissing me goodbye. I sat there, feeling sick. The next few weeks were awful. Graduation loomed, and real decisions had to be made. I got a job offer from this amazing design firm in the city, 2 hours away. I wanted it so bad I could taste it. Leo got offers both local and in my city. When I told him about mine, he immediately said he'd take the local one. He mumbled something about staying near his family, but I could see it on his face. He was already starting to resent the choice he'd made with Becca, and now he was making the same choice with me. We had this long, painful conversation. I told him I needed him to want his own life, instead of just following me around. He got quiet, then asked if I even wanted to be with him. Yes, I said, but not like this. Not with you giving up things, and then hating me for it later. Leo's graduation party was at his parents' house. Everyone kept congratulating us on finally getting together. His sister, Araya, pulled me aside near the kitchen. "Are you sure about this relationship, Julia?" she asked, her voice low. "Leo's been making decisions based on what he thinks you want since you were kids. I'm worried he doesn't know who he is without you." Her words stuck in my head for the rest of the party. I watched Leo talking to his relatives, and a cold realization washed over me. I'd been so focused on my own fears that I hadn't noticed he might be losing himself. When we were 5, he dumped his juice box because I said I didn't like that flavor. When we were 12, he quit the chess club because I thought it was boring. At 18, he turned down California for me. Araya was right, and I had no idea how to fix it. 2 months after graduation, Leo was working at some local engineering firm, and he hated it. I could tell. I'd visit on weekends, and he'd be tired, frustrated, complaining about his boss, the boring projects. One night, I woke up to use the bathroom and caught him looking at California job listings on his laptop. My heart sank. I asked him directly, "Do you regret turning down Becca's plan?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he admitted it. Sometimes, he wondered what his life would look like if he'd chosen differently. We stayed up the rest of that night, talking about what we actually wanted, instead of what we thought we should want. He said he felt stuck. I said I felt guilty. We both agreed something had to change. We decided to try long distance. Leo took a better engineering job 3 hours away. That first month was terrible. We were used to constant contact, and now we had to schedule phone calls like strangers. He'd call during his lunch break, and I'd be in the middle of a design meeting. I'd text him at night, and he'd already be asleep because he had to wake up early. I threw myself into work projects, started making friends at my firm. We'd go to art galleries on weekends, and I'd realize I was having fun without Leo there. It felt like freedom, and it felt like losing something all at the same time. I was surprised, honestly. I actually liked having space to figure out who I was, without Leo always around. For months into long distance, we were barely talking beyond quick updates about work. One afternoon, I went on a coffee run with my coworker, Caleb. We ended up walking around the city for an hour, just talking about design, music, nothing important. When I got back to my apartment, I realized something jarring. I hadn't thought about Leo all day. That night, when he finally called, our conversation felt forced. Empty. He told me about some project, I told him about a client presentation. We both knew we were just going through the motions. After we hung up, I sat there, staring at my phone, wondering when talking to my best friend started feeling like a chore. I thought about texting him that I missed him, but I wasn't sure if it was even true anymore. The next week, I signed up for pottery class. Someone at work mentioned it, and I just thought, why not? The studio smelled like wet clay, maybe 8 people sitting at wheels, looking just as clueless as me. The teacher, an older woman with gray hair pulled back in a messy bun, kept saying things like, "Feel the clay. Don't force it." It sounded fake deep, but it actually helped. My first bowl looked like a sad pancake, but I didn't care. Because for 2 hours, I wasn't thinking about Leo, or our weird half-relationship, or anything except keeping my hand steady. I started going every Thursday night. By the 3rd week, I could make something that almost looked like a mug. The people in class were nice, in that casual way where you chat while working but don't exchange numbers. There was Noah from accounting, Sarah, the middle school teacher. We'd joke about our terrible pottery as we cleaned up. On Fridays, I started hitting the art market downtown with people from my design firm. We'd walk through the vendor stalls, sipping overpriced coffee. I'd buy little paintings, handmade jewelry I definitely didn't need. My apartment started filling up with things that had nothing to do with Leo. Things I picked because I liked them, not because they reminded me of some shared memory. Caleb invited me to his birthday party, and I went, even though I barely knew anyone there. I ended up talking to his roommate about graphic novels for like an hour. When I got home, I realized I'd had actual fun, without checking my phone once to see if Leo had texted. The weird part was it did feel like freedom, but also like I was betraying something. Every time I laughed at a joke Leo hadn't heard, or made plans he wasn't part of, there was this small, guilty feeling in my chest. Like I was supposed to save all my good moments for him, even though that made no sense. I'd been building my whole life around Leo and Julia since I was 5. Now I was just Julia. And I didn't know if that was growth or loss. Or both. 3 months into long distance, my phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. It was weird because Leo and I had stopped calling unless we scheduled it. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. He was crying so hard I could barely understand him at first. He kept saying he felt stuck, invisible, like his life was on pause, and nothing he did mattered. I sat on my bed, holding the phone, trying to figure out what to say while he talked about how his job was fine, his apartment was fine, everything was fine, but he felt like he was disappearing. He admitted he only took that engineering position because it was close enough to visit me on weekends, not because it was what he actually wanted for his career. He said he'd been making choices based on what would keep him near me since we were kids. And now? He didn't even know what he wanted anymore. I asked him, "What would you want if I wasn't in the picture?" He went quiet for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then he said softly, "I don't know how to want things for myself, Julia. Needing you, that always felt like the only thing that mattered." My heart ached. I realized we'd both been doing the same thing, making decisions out of fear instead of desire. I'd taken my job partly because it was far enough away to prove I could exist without him. He'd taken his job to stay close enough to keep me. We were both so scared of losing each other that we'd stopped building actual lives. After we hung up, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how loving someone should mean putting your whole life on hold. But somehow, that's exactly what we'd done. 6 months after graduation, we had the breakup conversation. Over video chat. Leo's face on my laptop screen looked tired and sad. I probably looked the same. We'd been dancing around it for weeks, the calls getting shorter, more awkward, until we were basically strangers who used to know everything about each other. "Maybe we rushed into romance," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "when we should have just stayed friends." I agreed, even though hearing the words out loud felt like something breaking in my chest. We talked about how we'd gone from best friends to couple without figuring out how to be both. How we'd assumed our history meant we could skip steps, but that's just not how it works. Leo said he needed time to figure out who he was without me. And I said I needed the same thing. We decided on a real break. No contact for a while. Not the fake kind where you still text every day, pretending you're giving space. When we hung up, I closed my laptop, sat there for a minute, just breathing. Then I started crying. And I couldn't stop. I cried so hard my roommate knocked on my door, asking if I was okay, and I couldn't even answer. I cried until my face was swollen, my throat hurt, my chest ached. Losing Leo felt like losing a piece of myself. Like cutting off a limb I'd had since I was 5 years old. I'd spent more of my life with him than without him, and now I had to figure out how to be a whole person alone. Thanksgiving. I drove home, dreading the whole weekend. My mom, of course, made her usual massive dinner, invited half the neighborhood. While I was helping with dishes, she casually mentioned Leo was visiting his family too. My stomach dropped. I spent the rest of the night hyper-aware of every car sound outside. I kept looking out the window at his parents' house next door, like I was 15 again, waiting for him to come over. Saturday, I barely left my room, terrified I'd run into him getting mail, or taking out the trash. Sunday morning, I woke up early, made myself coffee in the kitchen. I looked out the window and froze. Leo was sitting on his front steps, just sitting there in a hoodie and jeans, staring at nothing. When he looked up and saw me through the window, our eyes met. I couldn't move. He looked different, more solid, more real than he'd been on our video calls. Like he'd grown into himself in the months we'd been apart. I stood there, holding my coffee mug, trying to decide what to do. And then he raised his hand. A small wave. Before I could even think about it, I grabbed my jacket and went outside. We ended up talking for 4 hours on his front steps, just like we used to when we were kids. At first, it was awkward. Both of us too polite, too careful with our words. Then he told me about his therapy sessions, and I completely forgot to be nervous. He said his therapist had helped him realize he'd been afraid to want things for himself because he thought needing me made him weak. He'd spent so many years being the person who took care of me that he'd forgotten how to let himself need anything. I told him about my pottery class, about the art markets, how scared I'd been that building a life without him meant I didn't love him anymore. I admitted I'd pushed him away because I was terrified of becoming Becca, of being the person who made him give up his dreams.
He said he understood that now.
That we'd both been so afraid of the wrong things, we'd run from the right ones. We talked about our jobs, our friends, all the things we'd done in the past 6 months. It felt like being best friends again. That easy, comfortable way we used to talk before everything got complicated. But it also felt different. Because we weren't pretending anymore. We weren't trying to force something or hide from something. We were just Leo and Julia, figuring out who we'd become. Then Leo pulled out his phone. He showed me a job offer. In my city. It was with a really good engineering firm, working on projects he actually cared about. He said he'd interviewed for it a month ago, without telling me. Because he needed to know he was making the choice for himself. He was taking the position regardless of what happened with us. Because it was what he wanted for his career, not because of me. Something shifted in my chest when he said that. For the first time since we were 5 years old, Leo had made a choice that was truly his own. He wasn't following me or staying close or sacrificing anything. He was building his life, and I just happened to be in the same city. I asked him what this meant for us. He said he didn't know. But maybe we could figure it out. He said he wanted to try again, but differently this time. Without all the fear and the guilt and the history weighing us down. And I realized I wanted that too. I wanted to see who we could be when we were both whole people, choosing each other instead of needing each other. We agreed to start over. Slowly. When Leo moved to my city in January, we'd date like normal people instead of assuming our 16 years of history meant we could skip steps. Our first official date was at this coffee shop near my apartment that I'd been to 100 times, but never with him. Leo showed up with flowers, which was so formal and weird that we both just laughed. We ordered drinks, sat at a tiny table by the window, and it was awkward in the best way. We were trying to be romantic, but kept falling into best friend mode, then catching ourselves and trying again. He told me about his new job, and I told him about a design project I was excited about. When he walked me home, he kissed me goodnight at my door. And it felt completely different from that first desperate kiss in my apartment. This one was intentional, and careful, and less scared. Like we both knew what we were doing this time. The next 6 months were hard work. We had to learn how to be a couple while also being separate people. And it did not come naturally. We fought about making time for each other versus our own friends. I had to resist the urge to fall back into our old patterns where we did everything together. Leo had to learn to tell me when he needed space instead of just disappearing for days. We had this huge fight in April because I made plans with my pottery class friends on a night Leo wanted to see me. He said I was choosing them over him. And I snapped. That's exactly the kind of thinking that broke us up the first time. We didn't talk for 3 days. I was terrified we were going to end up right back where we started. But then he called. And apologized. He said his therapist had helped him see he was falling into old fears. We talked it through. Figured out a better way to handle scheduling conflicts. Slowly, we found a rhythm. A way to be close without losing ourselves. We had date nights and friend nights, and nights where we did our own thing. It felt healthier. And harder. And so much better than before. When Leo's company offered him a promotion that would mean moving to their California office, he didn't tell me for 2 weeks. I found out because he left the offer letter on my kitchen counter by accident. I was hurt at first, that he'd kept it a secret. But then I realized he was trying to figure it out on his own. Like he should. We talked about it one night, over takeout on my couch. He said he'd been going back and forth for weeks because the promotion was amazing, but he genuinely loved the project he was working on here. I told him, honestly, that I'd be sad if he left, but I wanted him to choose what was best for his career. And I meant it this time. I wasn't saying it because I thought I should or because I was scared of being Becca. I meant it because I wanted Leo to have the life he wanted, even if that life didn't include me in the same city. He looked at me for a long time. Then he said he was turning it down. Not because of me, but because he really did prefer his current project and the team he was working with. The California office would mean starting over, and he liked where he was. I believed him. And that felt huge. 2 years after that first kiss, we were at the same crappy diner where we used to have Sunday dinners in college. The food was still terrible, but we kept coming back because it was ours. Leo was nervous through the whole meal, dropping his fork twice, barely touching his burger. I thought, oh no, are we going to have another hard conversation about our future? Then he reached across the table and took my hand. He said he'd spent the last 2 years learning how to be his own person. And the best part? Being his own person made him want to be with me even more. He pulled out a ring and asked me to marry him. I said yes, because I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't scared that loving him meant losing myself, or that he'd resent me later, or that we were making a mistake. We'd both grown into people who could stand on our own, which made choosing to stand together feel incredibly right. We'd done the hard work of breaking apart and building ourselves back up separately. Now we got to choose each other. Not because we needed to, but because we wanted to. Planning the wedding turned into this weird reality check about what we'd actually become. I sat at the venue with the coordinator, talking about seating charts, and realized I was scheduling separate friend tables for Leo and me. Because we'd built actual lives apart from each other. My pottery class friends who'd never met Leo. His work buddies from the engineering firm who barely knew me. It hit me that we weren't those desperate kids anymore, who couldn't function without each other nearby. We had our own hobbies, our own people, our own bad days that the other person didn't fix. Leo would come home from work, frustrated about a project, and I'd listen, but I didn't try to solve it because that wasn't my job anymore. I had a gallery rejection that stung, and Leo hugged me, but didn't take it personally like it was happening to him too. We were choosing each other every single day, instead of just defaulting to each other, because we'd always been together. It was harder than I'd imagined that night on my couch when he first kissed me. Messier, too, because we had to actually communicate instead of just knowing what the other person needed. But it was better than any fairy tale version I'd been too scared to want back then. The wedding day came. Araya stood up to give her speech, looking exactly like Leo when she got emotional. She talked about watching us grow up next door, how she'd seen us spend 16 years perfecting friendship, and then 2 years completely rebuilding everything we thought we knew about each other. She said she'd never seen 2 people work harder for their relationship, or fight more to figure out how to be both independent and together. When Leo and I danced later, his hand steady on my back, I thought about how we'd almost lost each other completely. How we'd had to break apart and learn to be whole people separately before we could actually be together properly. Every fight we'd had about space, every night we'd spent apart learning who we were alone, had led to this moment, where I knew exactly who I was and still chose him. He looked at me and smiled, and I knew he was thinking the same thing. We'd done it the hard way, the messy way, the way that almost destroyed us. But here we were. And that's our story, in all its complicated, beautiful mess. What about you? Have you ever had to step away from someone you loved just to find yourself again? I really want to hear your thoughts on this. Let me know in the comments below.